With Caitlyn Clark sidelined for the WNBA All-Star Game, the pressure was on the players. This was their chance to show they were deserving of the spotlight and the big money they're demanding. They made their statement on the court, but the fans had something to say too. And ESPN doesn't want you to know about it. When the viewership numbers came out, ESPN once again ran cover for the league and its players. It would have been fine to just post the ratings, but instead, they tried to ignore Caitlyn Clark's influence. Caitlyn's fans immediately called them out because this isn't the first time ESPN's tried to downplay her impact. But this time, after what happened on the court, it's backfiring. Let's break it all down. But first, like this video if you're tired of ESPN's tactics, and subscribe for more updates on Caitlyn Clark and the WNBA. ESPN has a habit when it comes to Caitlyn Clark's impact on viewership. They don't outright lie, but they definitely don't share the whole truth. Instead, they cherry-pick numbers, focusing only on those that fit the narrative they want to push. And when it comes to Caitlyn, the numbers they leave out are the most revealing. Take this example. After the 2025 WNBA draft, ESPN proudly reported that viewership was up by 119%. At first glance, that seems like a massive win for the league. But take a closer look, and you'll notice something odd. They compared it to 2023. Why skip over 2024? Anyone in marketing or media will tell you that you compare year over year, this year versus last year, not this year versus 2 years ago. So why skip 2024? Because that was Caitlyn Clark's draft, the one that drew 2.45 million viewers. And if they compared it to that, the headline would have been, "Draft viewership is down 49%. But they didn't want that story to get out. And the truth is, this isn't a one-off. They used the same tactic during March Madness in 2025, in the second round, Sweet 16 and Elite 8. ESPN compared viewership to 2023. Caitlyn was in the tournament that year, so at first it seemed fair. But when it got to the Final Four and national title game, the comparison stopped. Suddenly it was just third highest ever, which sounds impressive, until you remember that the 2 years prior were 2023 and 2024, both of which Caitlyn made it to the Final Four. What happens if they show the full numbers? They'd have to admit that viewership dropped by over 10 million. So yeah, they'll compare against Caitlyn Clark if they beat her numbers, but if they don't, they stay silent. That's not an oversight, that's deliberate. And the funniest part? They don't think fans will catch it. They think if they throw out enough big-sounding stats, people will believe that women's basketball keeps setting records without Caitlyn Clark. But in reality, they're making it even more obvious. It's the Streisand effect. When you try to hide something, you only draw more attention to it. That's what ESPN is doing right now, and Caitlyn's fans catch it instantly, calling it out every single time. Every spin, every selective stat, every dodge just proves one thing. Caitlyn Clark is driving the growth, and clearly, they don't want us to know that. But it's not just ESPN. This issue stretches across the entire WNBA ecosystem. Every time the league, its players, or the media try to downplay Caitlyn's impact, they don't diminish her. They only expose themselves. And honestly, at this point, it's become laughable. When Caitlyn Clark won Time's Athlete of the Year, the backlash came fast. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because apparently everyone in the league deserved it. There were even calls to include all WNBA players on the cover, as if the award was for participation. Funny how this standard only appears with Caitlyn. When Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, or Nafisa Collier get featured by Time or Sports Illustrated, no one asks for a group photo. It didn't stop there. When Caitlyn won an ESPY, even her own coach couldn't congratulate her publicly without immediately shifting the credit to every other player in the league. Caitlyn got honored as the WNBA Player of the Year, and yet, in the same breath, her coach felt the need to mention every other player in the league, justifying Caitlyn's success as part of a collective achievement. It's clear how fragile the ecosystem around Caitlyn is. Even praise has to be politically negotiated. And when the media does acknowledge Caitlyn's popularity, it's never because of her own merit. It's always because of a rivalry, a moment, or a narrative, anything except the actual player pulling in the numbers. And when they finally do admit she has an impact, they'll never give her full credit for it. Millions of fans, and suddenly, those fans are a problem. The new fans are draining the life out of the WNBA right now. Let's start with you, Cal, because Lord Jesus, your team and their fans, they really be getting into everyone's business. It feels like so many fans think they can say whatever they want to us. And unfortunately, that comes with a lot of nasty comments. These people wouldn't dare say these things at their jobs. So yeah, we definitely need to do a better job protecting the players, and it escalates from there. Caitlyn's fans aren't just loud now, they're being labeled as toxic, hateful, or even racist. Apparently, they don't support Paige Beckers because of her stance on social justice. Or they say Caitlyn should have picked Angel Reese for the All-Star draft just to keep her fan base in check. Even the Phoenix Mercury jumped in with a not-so-subtle message suggesting that Indianapolis isn't a safe place for players. It's crazy because this entire ecosystem, the league, the players, the media, is trying to downplay the player who is literally carrying the league's growth while punishing the fans who made it possible. And they know it. But they'd rather protect their egos and hold on to power. Which is hilarious because the second Caitlyn's fans tune out, that power vanishes. And right now, for the players, that power is everything. They're in the middle of a tense CBA negotiation, hoping to cash in on a massive media rights deal that, let's be real, is being driven almost entirely by Caitlyn Clark. But behind the scenes, there are serious concerns. Despite what the media or the players say, the owners know the truth. This league is heavily reliant on Caitlyn's appeal. When she's not playing, ratings and ticket prices don't just dip, they drop by 50% or more. And that's not normal. No other league experiences this kind of drop. Imagine how many NBA players could get injured and ticket prices would never fall this low. LeBron James could be injured. Steph Curry could be injured. Kevin Durant could be injured. And ticket prices would still remain high. Yet when Caitlyn Clark was ruled out of the All-Star Game, it put the players in a tough spot. This was supposed to be a marquee moment, the league's biggest spotlight, and suddenly they were on their own. No Caitlyn, no guaranteed ratings boost, just the players and a chance to prove they could carry the moment without her. And from the start, things went sideways. Ticket prices dropped by 48% the moment Caitlyn was ruled out. That left one big question. How bad would it get? Could the players pull off a miracle without her? Or would the numbers finally show just how deep this dependence runs? Well, the ratings are in, and ESPN went full damage control. They announced historic viewership for the 2025 WNBA All-Star events, with 1.3 million viewers for the skills and three-point contests, an 89% increase over last year's numbers. The weekend started strong. The skills competition and three-point contest saw a huge viewership bump compared to 2024, a great sign for the league. It looked like the players might actually pull it off. Maybe they could generate record numbers without Caitlyn Clark on the court. But then, ESPN went right back to their old tricks. The All-Star Game ratings were the second most watched ever, just behind 2024. The 2025 All-Star Game had 2.2 million viewers, up 158% from the 2023 All-Star Game. Did you catch that? They compared the ratings to 2023, the year before Caitlyn Clark entered the league, even though just a few lines earlier, they compared the skills competition to 2024. Why the sudden change? Maybe it's because last year's All-Star Game, the one with Caitlyn Clark, pulled in 3.4 million viewers. This year's, 2.2 million, a 36% drop, 1.2 million fewer viewers. Gone. And instead of owning that, they buried it. Can you imagine saying Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the NBA's all-time leading scorer, then putting a little asterisk that says, except for LeBron? That's exactly what this is. A deliberate choice to spin the numbers in a way that sounds impressive without telling you the full truth. Most people are busy, and when they see 2.2 million viewers and 158% growth, they think the league is exploding in popularity. They don't have the time to dig deeper, and ESPN knows it. So, while the numbers may technically be accurate, the way they're framed is designed to mislead and tell a false story, one that makes it sound like this year's All-Star Game was historic. But how can it be historic when it's half of last year's numbers? Last year was nearly 4 million viewers, and this is where ESPN really messed up. Instead of softening the blow, their spin amplified the problem. It triggered the Streisand effect. Everyone noticed the 2023 comparison trick. Why would ESPN compare this year's All-Star Game to 2023? Why would they do that? Let me break down why ESPN did this. It's another clear example of mainstream media trying to protect the WNBA. ESPN is polishing a turd, covering up the reality of a league that is struggling to stay relevant. Here's the thing. 2.2 million viewers is actually a great number by WNBA All-Star Game standards. But when you compare that to last year's record with Caitlyn Clark, it's impossible to ignore her impact. The drop, down 36% from last year, makes what the players did during All-Star Weekend look a little embarrassing. They walked in with their heads held high, wearing protest shirts saying, "Pay us what you owe us." They used a fan event to push their message about what they deserve. And here's the truth. It was a gamble in the court of public opinion, and it backfired. The WNBA players came out in these "Pay us what you owe us" t-shirts, and then immediately turned in the worst All-Star Game performance in professional All-Star Game history. They made a statement about being underpaid, about the league losing millions of dollars, but then they served up a complete mess to the fans. And then came the cherry on top, Kelsey Plum. In the post-game press conference, she called out Caitlyn Clark and her team, implying they didn't care enough to show up to discuss the protest shirts. She said, "The T-shirt United front was determined this morning. We had a meeting, and to not tattletale, but 0 members of Team Clark were present for that." She made this comment in Caitlyn's home market, during an event that was supposed to unite the league. It was an insane misstep. Instead of praising Indiana for hosting a record-breaking weekend, celebrating the sold-out crowd, the city, and the fans, she took a shot at the one player who's literally giving the league the platform to demand more. Kelsey and others tried to laugh it off as a joke, but Caitlyn's fans, the ones who are about to contribute a lot more money to the players' pockets, didn't see it that way. NBA champion and broadcaster Stacey King said it perfectly. "As you're fighting for better salaries, you're portraying a united front at your biggest event, and you still find a way to throw shade at Caitlyn Clark. Why?" King went on, "Look at Sabrina's reaction to Plum's comment. It says a lot. Some of these girls are really petty, and someone needs to explain to them it's hurting their league, and it's sad to see." He's right. With the poor on-court performance and Kelsey's off-court comment, the WNBA players couldn't afford another hit. Dropping a 36% ratings decrease could have been the final nail in the coffin. But ESPN's declaration of a historic event was exactly what the players needed. Still, I'm just talking about the court of public opinion. The owners? They can see through all of this. If you dig a little deeper, they'd probably be the first to admit it's actually worse than it seems. If Caitlyn had played in the game, not just been on the bench, the numbers wouldn't have just matched last year's 3.4 million. They likely would have beaten it. Just look at the numbers this season. When Caitlyn plays, ratings explode. Her games against the Sky, the Liberty, and the Sun have all ranked among the most watched WNBA broadcasts in decades, with viewership topping 2.7 million, 2.2 million, and 1.7 million, respectively. So realistically, If Caitlyn had suited up for the All-Star Game, we're probably talking over 4 million viewers. That means this wasn't just a 36% drop, it was a 50% loss in potential viewership. What's mind-blowing about all of this, though, is that even without Caitlyn Clark, this was still the second highest rated WNBA All-Star Game ever. And that's a huge distinction. Two things are clear. If Caitlyn Clark plays in the All-Star Game, it will set records. But now, because of her popularity, even if she doesn't play, it still breaks records and becomes the second highest rated game ever, only beaten by the time she was actually in it. That matters. Instead of comparing this year to 2023 to make it sound like a historic night, why not just admit the truth? Because of Caitlyn Clark's influence and the new fans she's brought in, you just had the second most watched All-Star Game ever, and she wasn't even playing. Just admit that the Caitlyn Clark effect is real. It's helping the league grow, and in the same breath, thank your new fans. That's it. That's all the fans want to hear. Not the gaslighting, not the subtle jabs at Caitlyn after the game implying she didn't initially support the statement when she's literally the foundation of everything you're fighting for. The reality is that the players are going to get more money. No question. Even though the league has taken a loss every year, team values have doubled since Caitlyn arrived. The owners have every reason to invest. They don't want a lockout, and neither do the players. But here's the truth. They could get a lot more if they just embraced the people making this growth possible. If they stopped insulting the fans. If they stopped pretending Caitlyn isn't the reason the numbers are rising, because the more they resist the Caitlyn Clark effect, the more obvious it becomes. And the longer Caitlyn remains the only player those fans care about. If you're still here, drop a goat emoji in the comments because that's what you are. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. As the final buzzer sounded, the atmosphere in the arena was a mix of confusion and disappointment. The players, still in their protest shirts, looked deflated as they walked off the court. The excitement that had been promised, a night to showcase their talents, their fight for better pay, and their unity as a league, felt hollow. The All-Star Game, the event that was supposed to highlight the best of women's basketball, had ended with more questions than answers. The crowd's energy had fizzled, and so had the momentum the players thought they could carry forward. Outside the arena, fans were already voicing their frustration on social media. "Where was Caitlyn?" they asked, their hashtags trending, echoing the undeniable reality that her absence had left a void that no one could fill. ESPN's spin, calling it a historic event despite the glaring drop in viewership, only fueled the fire. Fans weren't blind. They knew the numbers didn't add up. They knew that the league was trying to pull the wool over their eyes, pretending like the game had been a triumph when it had clearly been a missed opportunity. In the midst of all the confusion, Caitlyn Clark's absence was impossible to ignore. She was the face of the league, the one player who had brought attention, viewership, and fans to the WNBA like never before. The players had protested for what they believed they deserved, but in doing so, they inadvertently highlighted their dependency on the one player who was carrying the league's growth on her shoulders. Without Caitlyn, the All-Star Game was just another game, forgettable and overshadowed by the behind-the-scenes drama. As Kelsey Plum's comments echoed in the press room, it became painfully clear that the real issue wasn't about the money, the game, or the fans. It was about egos. The players' message had been clouded by petty politics, and their protest had backfired. Instead of standing united, they had drawn lines that divided the very fan base they needed. And as the night wore on, it became clear that the WNBA was at a crossroads. Either they could embrace Caitlyn's influence and the new wave of fans, or they could continue down the path of resistance, which, in the end, would only hurt the league more. The truth was undeniable. Caitlyn Clark wasn't just a player. She was the league's lifeblood.